Hi guys, it's Shanae and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm consuming my read-along for ErHa Volume 3. I'm kind of can't decide whether or not I'm excited, considering where we left off with the fact that Chuaning might be introduced into a harem soon. I don't know. Like, I'm stressed. So I'm kind of excited, but also, apprehensive. Hi guys! So just a quick thing as well, as normal, I have tea and water here with me. We're going to be taking a 10-minute break on the hour. And also I forgot to put on lip eyes, which I should probably do before we start. So I'm doing well, thank you for asking. I finished with my novel up to where I wanted to finish before the end of January, so I'm very happy about that. And yeah, I'm excited to get back into this. Also, quick note, but Juliet is in the room with me, and she's currently lying like right underneath my tripod. So if the camera just shakes randomly at some point, it might be because she's bumping it as she's like sleeping. I don't want to disturb her. I might invite her up at some point if you guys want to have like a peek, because she's grown quite a bit. But yeah, that is more or less it. I just want to give a little bit of time for people to arrive if there are still people who want to jump on. And yeah, I think that's more or less it. Also, I hope the audio is okay. Please just let me know if it is. And I feel like I'm forgetting something, but maybe it's just because I'm actually on time, and that doesn't happen often, unfortunately. Okay, so just for reference, while we wait, let me open up where we're at. So we are on page 279, chapter 111. And yeah, it's Shizun is like a blade, you are like water. That is interesting. Okay. Yay, thank you. Okay, so let me just grab a little bit of water. It is incredibly hot here tonight, so I'm kind of dying. Okay. I don't know, like, do you guys think we should get started? I feel like maybe we should wait a little bit. I really hope Juliet doesn't, like, accidentally topple the camera. There will be crying if that happens. um, okay, yeah. I think we can get started, right? Oh, let me just sort out the pillows first, sorry. There we go. So the goal is to read at least 40 pages, but it would be nice if we get to do a little bit more. We shall just have to wait and see how it goes. This king's second palace had only one entrance, and there were guards stationed outside. Not that Moran was so dumb as to saunter in through the front door. I mean, that's not what the book would sometimes lead us to believe, but okay. He vaulted up onto the roof, tucked the soul-calling lantern into his Chen-kun pouch so its light wouldn't draw any unnecessary attention, then flitted across the roof tiles, swift as a bolt of black lightning. As grand as the second palace appeared from the street, the interior was still more massive. Courtyard after courtyard of winding corridors sprawled beneath his feet. Moran leapt to the top of one of the taller buildings and flattened himself against the dark brown tiles of the roof. From his high vantage, the second palace looked like a small town that stretched as far as the eye could see. Moran was unbearably anxious. He understood now why that man in the doorway wouldn't tell him where his Shizun had gone. He was probably afraid to tick off the Ghost King. But though Moran knew that Chuaning was here in this palace, he still had no idea what to do about it. There were at least 900 rooms here, if not 1,000. Damn! This man has, I almost said money. Well, he might have ghost money, so I guess that counts. There were at least which of them held his Shizun? Moran was like someone on the cusp of finding a treasure, both his hands and heart alike tremoring violently. Shizun, where are you? Can't you use your sixth sense or whatever you have of Shizun to find him? He was absorbed in these thoughts when a line of soldiers outfitted in golden armor and battle boots stomped round the corner, each bearing a red lantern. They marched single file from the east gate to the main walkway, and after many convoluted bends and turns, arrived at an unremarkable side room. Also, sorry about that, whistle through my teeth if you heard that. My bad. A massive old pagoda tree stood before this room, neatly blocking Moran's line of sight. He could see only half the courtyard, the other half hidden behind lush foliage. The ghostly soldiers entered, chaos followed. There came shouts and the sounds of tables and chairs being knocked over. Then a frightened scream pierced the air, and a dishevelled woman was dragged out and tossed into the courtyard. Her clothes, already half falling off, slipped further until the under the rough handling, exposing large expanses of snowy skin. Well, I mean, if Chuaning is among them, even if he doesn't have his memories, he might still be prone to try and help, because it's Chuaning. So he should be self-stopped pretty soon. Hi! Trying to run? Trying to run? A whip cracked viciously down on the woman's body. This was undoubtedly a punishment tool for the underworld. It could inflict a searing, unbearable agony even on ghosts. The woman crawled up on the ground, trembling. She looked as if she wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. She was hemmed in by soldiers on all sides. You think you can just leave the fourth king's palace? I lived a virtuous life, the woman shrieked. I did nothing wrong. Why are you doing this to me? Let me go. I want to reincarnate. I don't want to stay here. The words turned into wails as the lash came down again. Serving the fourth king frees you of suffering the cycle of reincarnation. You sure don't know what's good for you. He didn't even choose me. Why wouldn't you let me leave? Another lash, this time across her face. Are these gods? Like, you just got her because apparently she has a pretty face. Now you're scarring that face? That's not the smartest thing. Like, if you're gonna be evil, at least be competent about it. The woman wept, shivering uncontrollably, yet still tried to crawl away. Her animalistic desperation seemed to amuse the fourth ghost king's soldiers. All of them laughed uproariously. One after another, more tributes were dragged from the side room. The leader of the soldiers raised his voice. Everyone's been working hard, and I know how bored you all get. These here are the fourth king's leftovers. Go ahead and pick a few to play with. In case I needed more reason to hate them. If any in particular strike your fancy, come register with me and you can take them home for yourself. I might puke. These lecherous ghosts howled and laughed as they crowded into the room to pick the comeliest goods. The woman outside wasn't spared either. She was instantly boxed in by several people under the trees. They lunged at her, like a pack of starving wolves intent on ripping her soul to pieces. The sounds of rough breathing and obscene words rose and fell inside the room. There were people crying, screaming, begging. There were also those who couldn't handle the torment and wanted out, who submitted to everything and did all that they could to earn favor. Whether in the underworld or living world, people all had this same ugliness. Moran jumped nimbly off the tall building onto the roof of the side chamber, carefully hidden under the cover of night. If what the old man at the wonton stall told him was correct, Chuaning had come here only recently. He wouldn't have been here long enough to go through the Ghost King selection process, so he shouldn't be among the cast-offs. But Moran couldn't help his worry. He pried a piece of the dark brown roof tiles up a sliver and stealthily peeked through the gap. The room smelled of sex, hot and heavy. Oh, mm. And in the mess of debauchery, Moran spied a familiar face. Rongjie. Rongjie? When did he die? I saw him was during the accusation regarding Moran, right? Oh, he died in Butterfly Town. Okay, that makes sense. Prostitute he had favored in his last life, who had taken advantage of Moran's fondness to scheme against him and tried to steal his cultivation. He was in there as well. Hi. Rongjie was a clever thing. He knew death as well as he knew life. Many in the room below struggled desperately, refusing to give in. Amidst that hazy chaos, some called the names of their lovers in life, while others cursed and fought for their dignity. But Rongjie was different. Moran knew what he was like. He loved money and he loved his life. He no longer had a life to love, of course, but he still valued his soul and had no desire to suffer. Atop the sheets of the wide, rumpled bed, the other unpicked tributes struggled and pleaded. Um, Let me just quickly see if there's. Um, Sorry, I just want to check because this is like a little bit rough. Um, okay, yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to age restrict this because also just trigger warning apparently. Sorry, I couldn't say that earlier, but I didn't know this is what we would be getting into. I should have thought, but I didn't think. I knew what he was like. He loved. Okay, we have that. Only Rongjie had his eyes closed, moving as softly as a kitten as he let the soldiers manhandle him without a word of complaint. At the sight of Rongjie's face flushed with arousal, Moran felt a chill pierce his heart. He thought of Chuaning. Rongjie was soft and kind. Chuaning was firm as steel. Anyone could see he was cold and hard as iron, as black iron, unbending and unyielding. In a situation like this, Rongjie would flatter and fawn, would lie back and use his softness to build himself an invulnerable fortress. As for Chuaning, Moran didn't even have to think about it. He knew what that person would do. He'd sooner scatter his soul and fall into the 18 holes than allow anyone to touch him. Running water never breaks, but steel blades snap. Ooh, ooh, that is a beautiful sentence, but considering the title, that's a terrifying thought. A sudden bang startled those in the room below as well as the one on the roof above. Moran raised his head to look towards the courtyard, and his face blanched. The woman from before, the one fierce as an inferno, had been run through by one of the soldiers. Tears slid down her cheeks as her soul gradually faded to transparency. For an instant everything froze. Then her figure dissolved into countless specks. Her soul had scattered. The soldier who had struck her cursed as he got to his feet. There was a lash mark across his face. The woman had likely wrested away his ghost-suppressing whip and struck him with it. That's the least we deserve. Like, at least she got a little bit of her own back. In a way. I hate that phrasing, but yeah. Wench, the soldier spat. Already dead and still so prissy. Bah. Moran felt like he had fallen into an ice-bound cave. It was as if the one he had seen just now wasn't some woman he didn't even know, but Chuaning himself, and the choice he would have made. Rongzhe was still tumbling in bed with those lecherous ghosts. This was a skill he had honed for survival. He would attach himself to someone sturdy like a climbing vine and engulf them in his softness like a trap. I mean, if he has to do that to survive, then that's his prerogative. One by one, the tributes in the room submitted, the stench of sex heavy and nauseating. Yeah. Moran didn't know how long passed before the curtain finally fell on the lurid spectacle below. Rongzhe really did know how to charm people. One of the soldiers pulled on his pants and immediately went to register with his leader. All that was left was for the fourth king to look it over, and the soldier would be free to bring Rongzhe home. These ghost soldiers were subordinates of the fourth king, and were therefore exempt from the cycle of reincarnation. Although it wasn't quite as advantageous as joining the retinue of the fourth king himself, sticking with these guys would still net Rongzhe a fairly comfortable life free from humiliation. Rongzhe was quite content with that. The soldiers who petitioned to bring Rongzhe home flirted with him for a few moments longer before leaving for guard duty. Why is like a part of me wondering if Rongzhe somehow is gonna know that Moran's there? That prostitute he had favored in his last oh, I forgot to turn the page. That's why I'm like, this sounds familiar. The group of fiends marched away in the distance, leaving the side room in disarray. It was dreary and cheerless, like the aftermath of a feast, leftover wine and sentiments spilled over the floor to grow cold. Rongzhe sat up languidly. Despite being a man, he was the most composed of the group. He dressed and groomed himself. As he gazed into the copper mirror, felt that his face had looked much too pallid in death compared to the rosy glow he enjoyed in life, and it didn't complement his coquettish gazes. And so, ignoring those sobbing, dazed, trembling women, Rongzhe cheerily straightened out his clothes, slipped on a pair of silk shoes, and strolled into the courtyard. Get you have to do what you have to do to survive, but the way that he seems so like disregarding of the other people's trauma, I get not like experiencing it yourself because of everything that you've already experienced. But the callousness of just walking past other people's trauma is what's getting to me. Howl had rough flowers as well, of even deeper red than those that bloomed in the world of the living. He picked a cluster of flowers, then dipped the tip of his slim finger into the sap to paint his lips and blush his cheeks. Everyone had their own priorities. Rongja had led a difficult life since birth. In his eyes, only the affluent, who stood high above the rest and never had to worry about going hungry, had the leisure to chase after things such as friendship. As for himself, he was merely somewhere a dirty thing in the mud. He couldn't afford to care about integrity and honor or whatnot. Okay? All he had was his life, and now that even was gone. All he had was his. Oh, now that even that was gone. Okay, that makes more sense. All he had was a soul. He heard a slight rustle behind him, like someone had brushed past the flowers. Rundra thought the soldier who'd taken a liking to him had doubled back, so he laid his gaze with a generous helping of affection. Everything cost money, only affection was free, and cast a coy glance back. Please tell me it's not gonna be Moran asking him for like where Chuaning is, because Roger might just rat him out. He saw plenty of trauma in his life, uh, and is probably used to it. Yeah. That is unfortunately fair and probably true. Um, exceedingly beautiful and charming, indistinguishable between male and female. But when he saw who it was standing coldly next to the flowers, Longzhi recoiled. He backed up a step, his eyes wide open and lips parted slightly, as though he had been struck by lightning. You? Me, said Moran. Longzhi's soft, pretty face cycled through a wild array of expressions: shock, hesitation, smugness, anger, apprehension, feigned nonchalance. Finally, he settled on cool and detached. He was so accustomed to wearing a smile. Those overly intense and ferocious expressions felt heavy on his face. He didn't feel like burdening himself with them. Fancy seeing you here, Mogongze. The two had parted on terrible terms last they'd met. Rongzhi straightened his spine and affected an air of studied indifference. I'm looking for someone, Moran said. Rongzhi scoffed. Who would have thought? A philanderer like Mogongze, so attached to someone even in death. Moran didn't feel like wasting his breath on Rongzhi. He took out a scroll and handed it over. Have you seen him? Rongzhi gave the drawing a quick glance. Ah, average looking, he sneered. Which brothel is he from? Moran frowned. What do you mean, brothel? Just tell me if you've seen him. No, Rongzhi said indifferently, and I won't tell you even if I had. Moran eyed him. I'm tired now. Got to go get some beauty rest. Please see yourself out and go back wherever you came from. Rongzhi, Moran called out to him. The slim figure paused, and his pretty face turned slightly, his expression smugged. Why am I smug, not smugged? Yes? I'm going to rescue him. I'll rescue you too, if you want. This place is ruthless. Surely you don't mean to stay here and hang around with these soldiers. You should go reincarnate. Rongzhi turned a bit more. Easy for you to say, Mogongze, said sweetly. Sure, this place may be ruthless, but what place isn't? Little old me lived a tough 20 years up there, and honestly it's not much different down here, except that my patrons are now ghosts instead of humans. What does it matter if I reincarnate or not? Moran paused. If you stay here, you'll be living under a knife. Rongzhi burst into laughter. After a moment, he pulled himself together, still chuckling as he looked Moran over. When have I not lived under a knife? People are knives. I'm just the meat on the chopping block. I'm lucky. If I'm lucky and get someone nice, maybe they'll pay me a little more. But if I get someone extra nice, like Mogongze, getting stiffed is the least of it. You stole from me and then turned around and pretended you didn't even know me. Mogongze, first you stabbed me, then you warned me of knives. How very considerate of you. I guess he's not wrong, but I'm still a little bit worried about this. Shizun is like a blade, you are like water because. Yeah, and I don't know, I felt like it contradicted the way he analyzed Chuaning originally, like the title and the way he analyzed him in the chapter contradicted. Um, Give me a second. My parents are here and they're like opening the door to see if Julian wants to leave, but she's completely asleep. Um, okay, let me just quickly. I think it should be fine. Let's just continue. Chapter 112. Shizun is not to be sullied. Interesting. Rongje was of course referring to Moran's actions on the first day of his reborn life, when he had been full of resentment. Thinking back on it now, while it was true that Rongje had wronged him in the last life, in which he had teamed up with Changgongzi to scheme against Moran's life, none of that had happened in this one. This Rongje hadn't yet gotten that far in his plot with Changgongzi. Moran really had no good explanation for having taken his money and things back then. That being the case, Moran didn't want to fight. It was my bad, he said. Everything I took from you that day I'll return in the future. And how do you intend to do that? Hongzhi asked. Or rather, what good would money and earthly treasures do me now? Moran could think of nothing to say. You can return the bracelets and pearls to me, but what about my life? What? Moran was caught off guard. Your life? Yes, my life. Hongzhi's expression clouded over. The topic still clearly a raw wound in his heart. Do you know how I died? Moran did not reply. Hongzhi had likely been holding this in for quite some time, and now that the lid was lifted, the steam beneath burst out in a torrent. His face flashed with rage that slowly grew twisted, and before Moran could say a word, he continued wretchedly. That Chang guy was ruthless. Once you cast me aside, I had no further value to him. He fed me some lies about how he really truly liked me, but his family objected because I was a prostitute in a brothel, not clean, and said it'd be best if we stopped seeing each other. I was blind back then. I thought his feelings were sincere, that he had no choice, that his parents made him. Ugh, I can't believe I fell for that garbage. Well, what are you blaming me for? Moran said. Shouldn't you blame that Chang guy? Why shouldn't I blame you? Rongzhi snapped angrily. I had enough saved up to buy my freedom, and you stole it. I was too miserable to stay at the brothel any longer, but I couldn't leave without money, so I ran away in secret. If you hadn't robbed me, I wouldn't have ended up like this. You ran away? That's right, I ran away. I ran to his place. Rongzhi's tone was hateful, but that Chang guide wouldn't open the door for me, even when the people in the brothel sent after me were closing closing in. All my struggles were futile in the end. They dragged me back there, beat me to a pulp, and locked me up. But that town character said you died when you went to visit relatives in Butterfly Town, and the ghost realm barrier broke, Moran muttered. Wow, this person is scummy. Huh. There was a shade of mockery in Rongju's androgynous face. How shameless can he be? Relatives? What relatives could I possibly have in Butterfly Town? Moran had no reply to that. What's that you said about living under a knife? I'll tell you what it means to live under a knife. Rongju was getting more and more worked up, his features more and more twisted. In that moment he truly looked like a vicious ghost. I'll tell you how I died, you and all my other dear patrons. Ha! Patrons. I was locked up in the brothel for ages without food, starving and suffering. Not a soul cared whether I lived or died. Days passed like that. I was just about to give up hope when the Chung guy turned up again. He came crying, telling me he couldn't let me in that day because his parents were in a bad mood, and he was afraid if he did, they'd have the servants beat me to death. Moran shook his head. It was an obvious lie. Surely you didn't believe him? No. There was motes of light quivering in Rongju's eyes. I believed him. Moran was speechless. I believed him. Rongju bared his teeth and smiled through his resentment, the corners of his mouth curling. Why wouldn't I? Doubt is the privilege of those with a way out. What am I but a peddler of flesh? If I didn't believe whatever people threw at me, how could I survive? He paused. The Chung guy said he would be true to his word and take me into his home, but that his parents couldn't accept me just yet. So he asked me to go with him to a nearby town and live there for a short time first. Butterfly Town? Yes, Butterfly Town. Moran's expression darkened. He already knew where this was headed. Sure enough, Rongju continued. So I happily packed my things. Actually, there wasn't much to pack, since you stole everything I earned selling my body all these years on a lark. But that's all right, I thought at the time. I have Changgongzi now. Huh. He was silent for a spell. His lips twitched with a soft snicker. Then he hastily spat out the name again. Changgongzi. So he tricked you into going to Butterfly Town, then killed you there? Rongju paused again. No. He wore a savage smile, and bitterness flickered in his eyes. He wasn't the one who killed me. It was all of you, who blocked my path one by one until I had no choice but to accompany him on that shady venture. It was all of you. It was all of you who killed me. Rongju took a deep breath. When we arrived at Butterfly Town, I followed the Chung guide to a large manor. It was quiet and empty, and there were no servants. He said he hadn't had a chance to decorate yet, and told me to stay there and rest while he went out to make some purchases. So I stayed and waited. After a while, he came back with some man. Some man, you say? Some orange peeling man, perhaps? I mean, he's not going to be peeling oranges when he meets Rongju, but still. Upon hearing this, Moran's expression shifted. Did you see his face? No, said Rongju. He wore a mask and a cloak with the hood pulled up. I couldn't see his face at all. And then I saw the Chung guy kneel before him, groveling even more pathetically than I do when I'm entertaining guests. If he could have seen himself in a mirror just then, disgusting. He told the man I had residual wood elemental spiritual essence on me, or some such thing, that I'd been intimate with you before. Oh, a good offering. Why does that make so much sense? Oh my goodness. Something like that. Who knows? I'm not a cultivator, nor do I want to be. I don't know what they were on about. But Moran felt his scalp go numb. It was true that he had been intimate with Rongzhe before, and that would have left traces of wood elemental spiritual essence in his body. That fake Gorchin had been looking for a suitable replacement for the heart-pluck willow. Although the lingering spiritual energy would be very faint, it would be pure, indeed suitable for use in spells. There's not much to say about what happened next. Rongzhe's usually easygoing expression now held a bone-chilling coldness. As Mogungze can see, I died. If the Moran before him had been that of the past life, or even the Moran recently reborn, he would have scoffed and mocked. So what if you died? What's it to me? But as he was now, Moran couldn't find it in him to laugh. He did loathe Rongzhe, and Rongzhe was unscrupulous, a man who had gone so far as to plot his death in the last lifetime. But though he had been physically intimate with Rongzhe before, never had they had a open, honest talk. Hearing such plain-spoken admissions from Rongzhe now, down here in the underworld, filled Moran with 100 mixed emotions. He mulled it over and came to a decision. There was no way to untangle all those countless threads of bygone affairs. He might as well just let it go. He sighed. I'm sorry about everything, Rongzhe. Rongzhe was caught off guard. Not once in his whole life had anyone said sorry to him. He looked at Moran over with wide eyes, like he didn't recognize him. Even if you say that, I'm still not going to tell you where to find the man in the drawing. This has nothing to do with the drawing. Rongzhe was still for a while, his head lowered. He suddenly spoke. Mogungze, do you know? Changgongze was plotting with me to kill you and steal your cultivation. I know. You know? Moran nodded. I know. Rongzhe's stare was blank. Then he said resentfully, that Chang bastard must have ratted me out. His head snapped back up, eyes flamed with hatred. If I'd known it would end this way, I would have listened to him and killed you. At least then I might have enjoyed a good life instead of dying miserably like I did. Do you always do whatever other people tell you to do? Moran gazed at him. So what if I do? Rongzhe asked. All I wanted was to live well. I sold my body, but what's wrong with that? Is it any different from selling fish or meat? It's merely a means to make a living. I knew all you young masters looked down on me, but it's hardly mattered. What's the point of stuff like reputation and dignity? I'd rather have good wine and good meat. That's why, if I could have killed you back then and saved myself, why shouldn't I have? Moran's lips moved slightly. He thought to retort, but then he remembered what he himself had done in his past life, and found he had no rebuttal to these words. People kill animals and eat their flesh in order to live, Rongzhe spat. So what's wrong with killing people in order to live? I'll just agree to disagree then. Is there any meaning in living like that? He murmured. The question was directed at Rongzhe as much as it was directed at his past self, the one who had sat high on his throne a lifetime ago. I don't know. I don't know what meaning is, Rongzhe said dully. I was 16 when I was sold into the brothel, and my first customer was a cultivator in his 50s. What gives something meaning? I wouldn't know. When I was alive, all I wanted was money. Money could buy me freedom, and then I wouldn't have to bow and simper to anybody anymore. But I never got it, even until death. Thanks to you beasts. What bothers me about this is, I'm not saying he's lying about the money could buy me freedom thing, but if that were the case, Assumedly, he would have done it in his last lifetime, and if he was able to buy his freedom in his last lifetime because Moran didn't steal the savings he had, then why did he still feel the need to kill Moran and steal his cultivation, or at least plan to kill Moran and steal his cultivation in the last life, when he apparently would have had everything that he wanted? Something tells me he just would have always moved the goalpost no matter what. A long silence. So, if you could do it all over, you'd help that Chung fellow murder me? Moran finally asked. That's right. All right then. If I could do it over, I'd still turn around and filch all your money, just to screw you over. You! In his anger, the faint blush on Rongju's cheeks from the flower was all the more vivid. His body swayed for a second before he slowly mastered himself. A minute passed. Rongju was aware that he lost his composure. He reached up to tuck a few errant strands of hair into place, then pulled himself together and schooled his features into their usual coy smile. Still, anger flickered in his gaze. You can say what you want. I can make my own way. Enjoy your time in the underworld, then. Rongju narrowed his eyes. I fully intend to. All I have to do is lay back on the bed, and I'll be spared the misery of reincarnating for the rest of eternity. I know a good deal when I see it. Unlike those idiots back there, I'm more than willing. Moran's lips tugged up in a brief smile. But Rongju, those soldiers work for the fourth king. Whether you live, whether you stay, it all hangs on his pleasure. Rongju flinched. He was immediately on guard, staring at Moran with those pretty eyes of his. What are you trying to say? Moran would have had no desire to go on quarrelling with him even if the situation had been otherwise, but though Rongju had a docile temperament, once he began to hate someone, he was unrelenting. Moran did his utmost to remain calm as he spoke. You may think the person in the drawing is average, but I think he's great. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, after all. Who's to say the Ghost King won't take a shine to him? With a frigid face like that, who'd be into him? Well done, Moran. I see where you're going with this. Please keep going, and I hope you'll succeed. You never know, Moran said. If the Ghost King liked the soft type, then why didn't he pick you? Roger fell silent, but his expression darkened somewhat. He has a fierce temperament, Moran pressed. If he gets picked, he'll probably flip the entire underworld upside down. And when the time comes to assign blame, the fourth Ghost King's people definitely won't get off easy. Some of those soldiers will hang for sure. If you want to make like a climbing vine, at least climb a sturdy tree. If the tree topples over when you've barely coiled yourself around it, losing your support will be the least of your worries. Chances are you'll get uprooted right along with it, and that'll be soul-scattering kind of end. Rongju's already pale face seemed to blanch further, but still he persisted. Coy yet vicious. I doubt any of that will happen. Moran said nothing. All right. No, Gongza, let's bet on it. I just can't stand to see you doing better than me. Few moments passed in silence. Then Moran turned vicious as well, his eyes fixed on Rongju. I'm not betting with you, he said. I will rescue him, Rongju. But if that's how you want to play, then I'll put my life on the line. Rongju tipped his chin up, and something flickered in his gaze. His palm shot out to press against Moran's chest like a serpent strike, like the sting of a scorpion. Who is he to you? How long have you been lovers? Longer than the two of us? Is he better than me in bed? Is it that he knows more tricks, or that he cries out more prettily? He paused, lashes lowered. Morgongse, you're not the kind of lovesick fool who would risk your life for another. You hold no affection in your heart. You can't fool me. Well, I mean, I wouldn't be so sure. He's been able to fool himself for quite a while. Finished when Moran pinched his cheek painfully. Moran peeled Rongjue's hand away, his ink-black brows drawn low and fire glinting in his eyes. I didn't have a heart before, I do now. Rongjue's eyes snapped up and locked onto Moran's face. He suddenly noticed that this person was scorching hot and even a little unfamiliar. The young man before him still appeared to be that free and easy-going Morwayer, but there was something different about the soul inside. Rongju flinched like he had been burned by this kind of Moran. He wanted to turn and run, but Moran's hand locked him firmly in place. And, Moran went on, between him and me, from here on out, there will be no impropriety. I respect and love him without a single impure thought. We'll see how long that lasts, that's all I'm gonna say. Don't you ever sully him again. At this, he shoved Rongjue away. Rongjue knocked into a column, staring incredulously at the person before him. He was too much in disbelief to notice the strangeness of the phrase, from here on out there will be no impropriety. Had he had his wits about him, he would have certainly realized the subtle implication about those words. No impropriety from here on out. That was to say there had once indeed been impropriety. But Rongjue didn't catch that. He isn't your... No, Moran said. He's my Shizun. Rongjue fell silent. He was the type who could always sniff out even the most subtle of sentiments hidden within the words of others. Moran himself might not recognize those feelings, but Rongjue could smell them. He was almost certain that Moran loved the person in the portrait. As someone who had never managed to obtain anyone's genuine affection, the thought filled him with a bitter jealousy. So there was someone even the desolate Moorgongse would willingly risk life and limb to save. Yep. Rongjue suddenly wondered. If he had been more sincere towards Moorgongse back then, if he had been earnest and wholehearted, then might Moran have also shown him some real feeling? He was still caught up in wondering when Moran spoke in a cold, vicious voice without the slightest hint of humor. Rongjue, I will ask you where he is one last time. If you still claim not to know, well, I'm a cultivator, and I know plenty of drugs and spells that will make a person talk. And if that fails, do you think I won't take the plunge and go see the Ghost King myself? Rongjue was completely dumbfounded. I've committed every kind of transgression in my life, he said softly, but now I want to live properly. However, if no one will lend me a hand, then I'm still that same Morwayer. Rongjue, think carefully before you answer. I'm not afraid to die, nor am I afraid of having my soul shattered. If you insist on standing in my way, I won't hold back either. Neither spoke as they stared at each other down, the resolute against the resentful, the unshakable against the unresigned, the fiery against the frosty. Then the ice in Rongjue's eyes melted, as if defeated by the wildfire in Moran's oppressive gaze. Rongjue's envy and hatred ran deep, but Moran's obsession was no shallow thing either. Head to head, he was no match for Emperor Taxianjun. Why does that sound so epic? That has no right to sound as epic as it does. Rongjue's face was so ashen that even the vibrance of the rose flower couldn't disguise the gauntness of his cheeks, hollow as ruins and wreckage. Why would you go so far for him? He treated me well. He treated me better than anyone, but I tormented him like he was my worst enemy. I owe him. A long moment passed. At last Rongjue whispered, I really haven't seen him. Seeing Moran's expression, he added slowly, I'm not lying, but I know what all the new captured ghosts are kept. Sorry. I'm not lying, but I know that all the newly captured ghosts are kept in the biggest hall on the east side. They're locked in individual cells patrolled by the guards. You should be able to find them there. Moran didn't even wait a second. He turned and rushed off into the night. Bonjour stared after him distractedly, feet rooted in place. A strange, bitter feeling flooded his chest, and despite himself, he yelled after Moran's retreating back. Moe, you want to lead a proper life now? Fat chance. You and I are both covered in filth. Neither of us get a do-over on a proper life. Moe, just you wait. I'm going to live well. I'll do whatever I have to do to cling to life. Even if I have to sell my flesh and my soul, I'm going to live lavishly, even if my whole body rots away. Just you wait. You think you can just wash away the stench of blood? As if. The filth's in your bones. Go ahead and play at being reformed, and I'll keep selling myself. We'll see who gets to live a good life, Moe. He shouted until even Moran's silhouette had disappeared. Only then did he drop into a crouch. His hands came to cover his face as he choked back his sobs. How come you get to do things over? How come you get to have someone who treats you well? Even someone as rotten as you. How come? Oh, that's a lot of heaviness. Are you guys doing? Are you surviving? Chapter 113. Shizun, imprisoned. That sounds joyful. I'm not stressed at all. The largest courtyard on the east side was as Rongju described. There were 3 floors in all, room after room of cells. It was the grandest sectors of vast estates, but also the most unkept. An old tree hung low by the entrance to the courtyard, and on it perched countless dead crows. Each held an eyeball in its beak that spun madly, surveying the surroundings for anything out of the ordinary. That is not unnerving at all. Eesh. You know, this book has so many characters with bad, sad endings. Yep. 2 small groups of patrolling ghost soldiers stomped back and forth, guarding the tributes that were to be offered to the 4th Ghost King. Concealed beneath a corner, Moran observed the ghosts' patrolling routes as he sized up the blind spots around the building. All the lights were lit in those small, box-like rooms. From time to time, he could hear the ghosts inside weeping or sighing. The sounds mingled and overlapped in the night like an eerie elegy. I don't know how to pronounce that. Elegy? Echoing from the ancient past. It was enough to make one's hair stand on end. There were upward of 300 rooms, and the patrol passed by every 10 minutes. There was no way he was going to be able to so easily find Chuaning in 10 minutes. And on top of that, every floor had a guard by the stair armed with a soul-shattering whip and wearing an emergency signal whistle around their neck. So basically impossible is what I'm getting here. I don't like Rongju. Fair, I'm also not a big fan of him. So I do think Nipan did a good job in writing him. Moran was fretting anxiously when he spotted a lone ghost approaching from a distance. He was dressed in the same uniform as the other guards, with a red-on-black token hung around his waist. Moran scooted farther into the shadows and watched as this man passed right in front of him. Coming to a stop at the foot of the stair, the ghost exchanged nods with the guards there. The night was very still, and from his hiding spot, Moran could hear every word of their conversation. Chica, are you here to relieve Lao San? You're almost off too, right? I'm just waiting for the next guy to take over. I'm off as soon as he gets here. The newly arrived ghost soldiers went up the stairs to begin his shift. The guard on the first floor yawned in boredom and continued to watch his post in the howling wind. Moran was suddenly struck by a risky idea. I'm guessing he's going to dress up like the guard that's supposed to take over patrol, I hope. But I don't quite know how that's going to work out. In the distance came three sounds: whack, slam, thud. The crows on the branch screeched, and the guards at the entrance snapped to alertness. He peered around and spied, through the thin layer of fog, the hazy silhouette of someone steadily approaching. As the figure drew closer, he could see that it was an unfamiliar young man. The guard grew wary. Who are you? I'm here to relieve you. Red clouds drifted past overhead, and the bright moon above peeked out to illuminate the new guard's face. And what a handsome young ghost soldier he was. His features were straight and even, charming and naturally expressive. This ghost who had come to change shifts was none other than Moran. Who was decked out in the ghost soldier's armored uniform that he had acquired from who knows where, complete with a black-red token swinging at his waist and an emergency whistle that dangled by his chest, reflecting a cold, silvery light. I've never seen you before. There was a challenge in the guard's voice. I'm new. The ghost stuck out his hand, unconvinced. Token? Moran untied the token at his waist and handed it over. His expression was even and unperturbed, but inside his nerves were stretched taut. Luckily, even after looking at the token several times, front and back, the guard found nothing strange. He didn't feel like pressing the matter, so in the end he clapped Moran on the shoulder and said, Well then, we'll be counting on you for the rest of the night. I'm off. Have a safe trip home, Chenbe. The ghost cackled a bit, well pleased at the respectful address, and waved his hand. Good lad. I'll see you around. Ah, Chenbe, a moment please. What is it? The guard turned to look over his shoulder. Moran grinned and very casually asked, Any tributes in the bunch have the surname Chu? The guard was cautious. Why do you ask? Just asking around for Sir Chu of Tailwind Hall. Moran said apparently a distant relative of his came down here recently, but Tailwind Hall can't find him, so he was wondering if he might be here. As expected, Shizun's name carried some weight around here. The guard hesitated a bit, then pointed towards the second floor. There are 3 people named Chu in the innermost room up there. You can take a look. Moran smiled brightly. Many thanks for the trip, Chenbe. That was actually super smart. Like, he has his moments. Moran really has his moments of being smart. I wish they would happen when Chuaning was there to see it, but we can't have all the good things happening at once, I guess. Through a lot of characters in the underworld trying to move on. I love Longji and will defend him to the end. I didn't like him, but I understand that he never had hope, and when he got a chance, he couldn't recognize it since he only knew sorrow. That's a good point. Okay, so, I think, let me just double check it. So we are on page 302. I think I'm gonna take my 10-minute break real quick, and then we will be coming back And I'm terrified, but really curious about where we will be ending off this live stream. So yeah, I will see you guys again at 10 past. Okay, sorry about that. I had to get Juliet resituated again, but I'm ready once more, so I hope she is as well. So, yeah, let us finish the second half of the stream. Mm, okay. Welcome. Shinbei was very dumb. Matter of course. With that settled, the god wandered off leisurely, humming a little light tune. He strolled right past the corner without noticing his royal comrade, the one who was meant to relieve him, trussed up with a binding spell and tossed in a ditch. Oh goodness, okay. The poor ghost had been stripped of his armor and left in only his thin inner garments. Glare as he might, he was gagged so well and thoroughly that he couldn't make a sound and lay there fumbling uselessly. Sorry, I think I might need to like. Juliet is very much not settled. Okay, are you fine now? Okay, sorry about that. Didn't trust Rongju not to pull something. The unpicked tributes were kept together in the side palace. Although there was only a barrier outside and no guard, there might still be patrols. Considering how much Rongju hated him, he would definitely rat on Moran if a patrol should pass by. There was no time to lose. He had to move fast. Moran stood and waited for a patrol unit to pass him. The second they were out of sight, he turned and bounded up to the second floor. The guard at the top of the stairs blocked Moran with a pike. Halt! State your business. It's my first day as a guard here, on the first floor. The guard furrowed his brow. Then go guard the first floor. What are you doing up here? Moran tried dropping Shizun's name again, but this guard wasn't buying it. So what if it's for Sir Chu of Tailwind Hall? He snapped, stone. Once the souls in this here palace, they're the property of the fourth king. If he wants to rescue his relative, he can take it up with the fourth king himself. Keep me out of it. Moran grumbled internally. This guy seemed a bit sharper than that one downstairs. He put on a bold front and tried again. It's not like I'm going to take him today, but at least let me have a look and see if I've got the right person. That's easy. Give me the name and I'll look it up. No need for you to go yourself. Moran was indescribably vexed. He tamped down his anger and said, Chuaning, his name is Chuaning. The soldier had lifted the roster to check, but the second he heard this name, he set it back down. Moran was immediately worried. What is it? What's the problem? What's the problem? The guard echoed with a sneer. You sure don't know your place, new guy. The fourth king came by earlier today to see the beauties, and he's sweet with this Chu Shenjun. He's only still here because his 7 days aren't up. So his 3 souls aren't united and he can't yet be taken. Thank heaven for that! And he can't be taken to the 4th level of hell. Otherwise, he would have been given to the Ghost King this very night. And you want him? What do you think the problem is? Moran's face had gone blue before the guard was halfway through. He stared at him for a long moment. The 4th Ghost King fancies him? So? Nothing. Never mind then, sorry to bother you. Moran turned to look and took 2 solemn steps down the stairs. Then Zheng formed in his hand, and before the guard could so much as blink, Moran had spun around and wrapped it so tightly around the guard's neck. With a flash of piercing scarlet, holy weapons could maim ghosts and gods alike. Why am I enjoying that so much? That's Probably not the best that Moran just lost his cool like that. The guard's last impressions were of scarlet willow leaves flying past, and the newcomer exclaiming angrily, "What makes you think I wouldn't fight the Ghost King for him?" before he lost consciousness and crumpled to the floor. Moran raised his hands and cast a spell to bind the guard and seal his lips, then kicked him aside. He sped towards the end of the hall. The 3 rooms down here all held souls with the surname True. Although Moran wasn't sure how, he seemed to know in his heart which way to go, so much so that before he'd even stopped to wonder at this peculiar feeling, his hand had already pushed open the door. My parents just came to come and get Juliet, so sorry about that. He stood looking into the second room, slightly out of breath from running so fast. He panted. A strand of inky black hair fell across his eyes, but he paid it no mind. His eyes fixed on the interior of the room. It was just as Rongju had said, a small room the size of an animal's cage, with drab, ashy walls of the color of death. But the person inside seemed so very warm, like a blazing flame in that cold expanse of white. Getting poetic. Not every tribute was bound, or at least Chuaning wasn't. Perhaps since the fourth king had already set his sights on this one, the gods didn't dare offend him. There was even a snowy white animal pelt on the floor, thick and soft as a layer of fresh snow in the deepest winter. Chuaning lay asleep on this fur rug. He was the kind of person who, though he appeared resolute and undaunted, was in truth ever a little uneasy deep down. Sorry, that's a weird sentence. This manifested most clearly in sleep. He always slept curled up, shrinking into himself to make himself smaller, as if he was trying to keep warm, but also as if he was afraid to take up too much space. Seen like this, he looked frail and a little pitiful. Guys, my heart. The soul wasn't like his human soul. His handsome face was clean of bloodstains, and the clothes he wore were different too. He was clad in vibrant red silks, the color of sunset. They were loose-fitting and broad-sleeved, and richly patterned with images of whirling dragons and soaring phoenixes, with dancing golden butterflies. Oh, yes, give him all the pretty things, though I suspect that it's not going to be for a nice reason that he's been given this outfit. Moran stumbled forward and dropped to his knees beside Chuaning. He reached out with trembling hands to caress his face. Wanning. The syllables that slipped out weren't Shizun, but the name by which Moran had called him in those final days of his past life. Those twisted days of hatred and entanglement, carved into his very soul. Moran lifted Chuaning into his arms, but it took some time for the drowsy man to wake. You know what just is a fear that suddenly sprung into my head that I hadn't thought to stress about before, but my brain was like, yes, you can now also stress about this. Is what if he now remembers things from his past life because his body is in the underworld and that's kind of a little bit outside of the constraints of the mortal world, so he might be able to access his past memories. That's it sounds a little bit ridiculous when I'm saying out loud, but it's a fear that just cropped up in my mind immediately. Yes, I'm happy we found him as well. I'm just apprehensive that things are still gonna go wrong. When Chuaning's eyes fluttered open, he found himself lying in Moran's embrace. The look of concern on the young man's face, those features that had yet to fully mature, was an expression that the likes of which he'd never seen. He furrowed his brows and thought that perhaps this was some kind of dream. Thus, after a moment, he sighed and closed his eyes once more. Why does that sound weirdly relatable? Shizun, someone called by his ear. It wasn't Wanning this time. Shizun, Shizun! Xuanling's phoenix eyes flew open. This time, although his expression remained unchanged, he was betrayed by the minute trembling of his fingertips. Moran took hold of his hand and pressed its palm to his own face, laughing and crying until his handsome features were a sorry mess. Shizun! He choked back a sob as he gazed at him, unblinking, then repeated the word over and over like he had forgotten how to say anything else. Shizun! Xuanling finally returned to his senses to find himself clenched tightly in Moran's arms. Feeling unconsciously that this was improper, he struggled free and sat up to nail Moran with a glare. Yeah, he hasn't gone through the life-altering, worldview-altering experience that Moran has gone through, so it's fair that he's still kind of treating things as normal. Long, long moments passed as he stared at Moran, not saying a single word. Then he flew into a rage. Oh no. Before Moran could react, Xuanling had jerked his hand away and struck him across the face with a backhanded slap. You idiot! He scowled furiously. How dare you die too? This is an absolute mess, but Xuanling is just so funny in the weirdest way possible. Moran opened his mouth to explain when he saw in the haziness of the moonlight that beneath all his anger, the eyes overshadowed by Xuanling's long lashes were sorrowful. They seemed to suppress a myriad emotions, as if he didn't want to believe the evidence of his eyes, and also as if he was holding back tears that would well up at the slightest touch. When he'd finished cursing, he bit down hard on his lower lip, using all his will to repress the shameful, humiliating tightness in his throat. Oh Lord, I love him so much. Love Xuanling, yes, yes. No, agreed. There were those who would make a great show of the tiniest cut and ensure everyone knew they'd been injured. And then there were those who were too proud to say anything, who would rather swallow their grievances and suffering, even if it tore their throats bloody, than speak a word of it. He never said, so Moran had never known. But now that he did, his heart ached terribly. He wanted to hold Xuanling, but Xuanling pushed him away. His voice was hoarse as he said, Get the hell out. Xuanling turned his face away, 1,000 layers of heartbreak hidden under the veneer of brittle coldness. You've got some nerve coming to see me after dying so young. Shizun, out! Xuanling's face turned away even further. You're no disciple of mine. I don't take anyone so useless as to end up dead in his prime. Dead in his prime? Moran had originally been dejected, but after being reprimanded so seriously like this, he felt warmth flood his heart like a trickling spring water. Are we allowed to call this character growth? I don't even know. This is just so funny. He raised a hand and clapped his palm to his forehead before dragging it down to cover his eyes. Then, unable to help himself, he began to laugh, bitter and sweet and sour all mixed together. The light sound of his laughter made Xuanling angrier still. Great! This is going swimmingly. You guys only have 10 minutes. Please hurry up. But also let's just appreciate the beautiful art that we got here. I hope you guys will be able to see it because, again, stunning. Even if it is kind of vaguely sad. But everything so far has been kind of vaguely sad, so this is just par for the course at this point. He whipped his head around to chide. What are you laughing about? You... In a fit of rage, he drew his arm back to slap Moran again, but Moran swiftly caught his hand. The young man's gentle eyes blinked, slow. Without a word, he solemnly brought Chuaning's hand to press against his own chest. Please say it's because he's like, look, I have a heartbeat, I'm not dead. Oh my word, the mix of emotions I'm experiencing right now. Okay, we are on chapter 114, page 309. And isn't that the novel in a nutshell? Yep. Shizun, say you will. I mean, that sounds like a marriage proposal, but I know it's not. Thump, thump, thump. A slow, steady heartbeat. Chuaning blinked. Surprise, joy, awkwardness, and embarrassment all flitted through his eyes in the space of an instant. But this was the Yuheng elder, after all. Calm and cool as ever, singularly adept at schooling his features into unruffled composure, sweeping those extraneous emotions under the rug in a trice as if the one who'd admonished Moran in despair just now had been someone else entirely. What are you doing down here if you're not dead? Chuaning regretted the words as soon as they'd left his mouth. It was obvious that Moran had come to save him, but Chuaning was afraid that if Moran really were to say that, his heart might beat right out of his chest. He was so nervous he completely forgot he was already dead and had no heart to speak of. I love Chuaning so much. But Moran gazed at him without saying any such thing. He likely knew Chuaning would be embarrassed if he were to say, I came here for you. Moran thought a bit, then pressed his lips together and lowered his lashes. Shizun, he asked gently, can you guess why I'm here? A long pause. You came looking for trouble? Since when did Shizun change his name to Trouble? Moran grinned. Should have told me. That's a terrible joke, but it's so cute. Chuaning jerked his hand back as if stung by this new gentleness. He snapped in flustered anger. What nonsense, how impudent. Moran had learned a secret. Chuaning's anger was a mask. This man was so awkward he donned that menacing, garish mask and hid all his gentleness, happiness, joy, embarrassment, and sadness underneath. What a dummy. Chuaning was a dummy. To wear such a mask his entire life. Wasn't it exhausting? Moran was a dummy too. It had taken him 2 whole lifetimes to figure it out. After that, the mood was a bit lighter, and now that Moran had located all 4 of Chuaning's souls, rebirth was finally within reach. Moran was in high spirits. We still have 70 pages to go. I have no hope left. He grabbed Chuaning's hand again, clutched it as he rambled on and on. Moran told him why he'd come down to the underworld and about Master Huaizhe. When he reached certain parts, he had to stop and wait for the tightness in his throat to subside before forging ahead with red-rimmed eyes. And in all his explanations, the words that appeared most were, I'm sorry. Chuaning didn't know what to say. He showed kindness to others, but he didn't do it to reap any benefits. If anything, he was afraid they'd feel troubled to receive his goodwill, or indebted to him. The honest truth was that he feared he'd offer up his warm, beating heart to someone, only for them to casually set it aside to cool. Torture me, why don't you? Thus, despite being open and straightforward in all other respects, he would always hide his kind deeds. He had worn a mask his whole life, but one day, the person he liked suddenly reached out and plucked that vividly painted anger right off his face, leaving him like a crab without a shell. He stood, dazed, at a complete loss for what to do. As Chuaning stared vacantly, Moran knelt before him, one hand still grasping Chuaning's, as if afraid he might disappear. For a split second, ridiculous, shameful thoughts raced through Chuaning's mind. This disciple of his had always been brazen and audacious, with no regard for common sense. But Moran Okay, I think there's a word missing here, so let's just see. But for Moran to suddenly take his hand and treat him thusly, he couldn't help thinking the other was up to something. Chuaning was startled by his own thoughts, and his face became gloomier still. Unsure what kind of expression he ought to wear, he could do nothing but fall back on the cool detachment that was his habit. But Moran wasn't up to anything at all. He continued to hold his hand like he was holding a treasure once lost, now regained. The person whom he had tossed aside like worthless junk in his past life. You don't need to keep on reminding us. We know it's painful. Shizun, having set down that grand burden of hatred, Moran knelt before him now, earnest, respectful, full of warmth. Before I was in the wrong. From now on, I'll go left if you say left, right if you say right. All I want is for you to be happy. Perhaps he was feeling too many emotions at once. His eyes sparkled with tears as he smiled up at him. So come back with me, okay? Chuaning said nothing. His face was calm and as still water, but his heart blazed like a beacon of fire. Shizun, Moran's voice was gentle and soft, with a touch of lingering youthfulness. When Moran hated someone, it was with unadulterated vehemence. But if he cherished someone, it was with his whole heart. He had always been this way, doing nothing by halves. Come back with me. Say you will, okay? Chuaning remained unresponsive. He stared absently at Moran as if lost in thought. Moran was worried Chuaning might still be cross, so he forced himself to smile through the dejection that settled over him, tried his best to keep it together lest he make his Shizun uncomfortable. He swung the joined hands a little and wheedled. Shizun can just nod. No response. Then, afraid he might not nod either, Moran considered for a moment and added, I'll count to 3, okay? Still nothing. If Shizun doesn't say anything, I'll take it as a yes, okay? Moran said nervous, but still gentle. He paused and slowly counted off. 1, 2, 3. But Chuaning was like a person exposed to the freezing cold for too long, suddenly plunged into warm water. He felt not warmth, but pain. He had never been wanted before, so he hadn't even known that to be frozen was an agony. But now that there was someone who treasured him, who surrounded him with warmth, it was as though he finally had a right to feel pain. Every inch of his body was on fire, every inch of his skin cracked. Only now did he feel the hurt. No, I get it, but no, this is a mess. What the 70 pages was for, isn't it? I'm stressed. The tips of his fingers quivered minutely in Moran's palm, which were now clammy with sweat. The longer Chuaning stood silent, the more anxious Moran grew. He was afraid Chuaning had lost heart and didn't want to return to the living world. But neither did he dare move, afraid that Chuaning would vanish, and leave him behind if he so much as twitched. Moran smiled warmly and tried again. I counted too fast. You probably weren't ready yet. I'll count again. 1, 2, 3. Moran's throat worked. He was trembling now, but he forced himself to smile and smiled, saying, practically begging, Shizun, did you hear me? Some focus finally seemed to come into Chuaning's phoenix eyes, but they were still distant, fixed on Moran's face with an unreadable expression. I'll count again. I'll go slower, in case it's hard to hear. Okay, but hold on, didn't he say if Shizun doesn't say anything? Now, he's not said anything so many times. I know we have books to go yet, but the problem is just like where this particular book is going to end. That's like we can't be worrying about all 6 other books or 7 other books that's still waiting for us. That's just asking for torture. 8 other books? I think it's 8 other books, right? We're on volume 3 now. Yeah, 8 other books. I'll count again. I'll go slower this time in case it's hard to hear. Moran said, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to count one last time. 1, 2, 3. This time is really the last. 1, 2, 3. Chuaning stared, blank-faced, at that young man kneeling at his feet, counting 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, again and again like a dummy, as if repeating it could reverse time's flow, could coax a withered tree to bloom, could bring back the dead. The disciple before him counted with all he had, clumsy, stubborn, like he was counting his own sins, counting all the ways his Shizun had been good to him. He counted until his voice shook, and his smile was one of panic. Shizun? Moran looked up. The rims of his eyes were red. He had already wronged Chuaning so greatly, all the way to this point. Moran didn't want to cry where he could see and hear. He didn't want to cause his Shizun any more grief, so he swallowed his tears and smiled. I just realized that it might also be not him just wanting him to say it, it might be him needing him to say it because of the entire thing of like he needs to come with, like Chuaning needs to agree to come with Moran. Keeping his tone light and easy as if bargaining. I'll count again. Pay attention to me, won't you? Chuaning felt like his heart was being stabbed by his pleading. He tried to pull his hand from Moran's grip, as if it frightened him, but this time Moran held on tight and refused to let go. With a dog-like persistence, the young man gazed up at him steadily, unblinkingly. He said, 1, 2. Just then, the sound of rapid footsteps echoed from the outside, accompanied by yelling and cursing. Chuaning's head snapped up. He saw a sea of lights swarming in the distance as a vast army of ghost soldiers closed in, heading straight for their location. Longjue had found a chance to snitch on them after all. There, upstairs, upstairs! Seize the thief! Who does he think he is? Everywhere looked was a tumultuous, frenzied chaos, the flickering shadows of ghosts and torches rolling in the tide to devour them, obliterate them, plunge them into the infinite hells for the rest of eternity. But Moran didn't even turn around. In that moment, holding Chuaning's hand, he felt at peace. Chuaning was not his lover, but he was his beloved person, someone he respected above all others, someone who loved him and treated him well. Gazing at him, Moran felt a calmness settle over his heart. Have you lost your mind? Chuaning hissed. What are you doing still on the floor? He turned his hand to grip Moran's and pulled him up as he spoke. His eyes were bright in the light of those innumerable torches, looking just as they had in life. Chuaning scowled and snapped, "Let's go already." Moran seemed surprised. "You're coming?" Now Chuaning was getting really mad. "Who else?" Oh, oh my goodness, that was not the moment that Moran hoped for, but it was a moment nonetheless, and we are grateful for it. Trembling, Moran closed his eyes. Then he opened them again and smiled. It was a brilliant smile, tears pooling in his eyes like lovely dew-laden blossoms. He finally let out a breath he'd been holding and clasped their hands together tight, fingers interlocked. He pressed his forehead to Chuaning's and whispered quietly, earnestly, 3. Trust him to have like a moment in the middle of a raid. Yeah, ErHa will have 11 books. Yeah, my wallet is already crying, it's fine. What do you mean 3? Hurry up! The sea of ghosts outside was drawn closer. Moran at last turned to look and let out a somewhat panicked sound when he saw the horde closing in. "Shizun, put up a barrier and hold them off for a minute while I get you into the soul-calling lantern." "I can't." "What?" Moran was dumbfounded. Choning's customary cool and collected expression was a little flustered. He quickly covered his embarrassment with irritation. "Do you really think I'd be trapped in this stupid little cage if I still had my powers?" Moran had no words. "All right then. So the thing missing from the soul was cultivation. That makes sense. Because I was constantly thinking, like, what is the thing that he's missing? But that makes so much sense." It's not fine. The money is flying away, yes. Yes, it is indeed. Oy. Uh, He had to recite the spell without interruption in order to draw a soul into the lantern. It wouldn't take long, but it would definitely take longer than they had. Moran could only grab Chuaning and make a run for it. Chuaning might have lost his cultivation, but he still had his martial skills. He easily kept pace with Moran. The two beat a hasty retreat, pursued by a torrential stream of ghost soldiers. When they'd made it as far as the door of the main hall, Chuaning asked, "Where are we going?" "Dunno." Chuaning was speechless. "I am too." But Moran pointed up at the towering palace walls, undiscouraged. "Let's go up there and scope it out." "Sounds great." Is he gonna like Tarzan his way out a window via his willow vine? Like I don't know what his plan is here. Fortunately, Chuaning had a solid foundation in Qinggong and had no problem vaulting up walls even without the aid of his cultivation. He alighted gracefully on the eaves, then looked down to see a swarm of angry ghosts roaring closer. "Summon Jingui." Moran did as he was told. A strand of radiant scarlet appeared with the swipe of his palms, and sprang forth like a hissing snake. Its willow leaves, vibrant and rustling as a holy weapon, settled into a coil by his feet. Channel your spiritual energy past Wuli through Chu Qi and converge on Shangyang, then whip downward. Moran raised his arm to strike. Chuaning suddenly remembered something and added, "Not too much spiritual energy." Moran faltered, but it was too late to pull back. The instant he flung the whip out, explosive fire shot from the hissing snake with a boom, like fire-spitting dragon roaring its fury as it cut through the torrential dead. The raging inferno blazed through the entire corridor, the flames moving the stars themselves, smoke rising beyond the clouds. The scores of soldiers at the vanguard were scorched to ash in a heartbeat. That's not good. Not even the walls and the trees were spared. Chuaning and Moran gazed at the wreckage in silence for a long moment. Didn't I say not to use too much spiritual energy? Chuaning scolded with a frown. But by the time he said it, I was already suddenly remembered his resolve to be respectful and not talk back to Shizun. Yeah, again, we'll see how long that lasts. Moran shut his mouth on his protest and said instead, a bit disgruntled, Shizun is right to scold me. Forget it. Chuaning flicked his sleeve. I did say a little late. Yes, thank you guys. I appreciate the compromise from both sides. That is, yes, progress. Baby steps, baby steps. Moran was taken aback. So all it took for Shizun to cave was for Moran to take the blame himself. He blinked and couldn't help but burst into laughter. Chuaning glared at him. What's so funny? Get a move on. This dynamic might be my favorite thing right now. I'm living for it. Oh no. I don't like that title. What? This is concerning. Oh no. Oh no, oh no, no. Things are coming together for me and I'm really worried. I'll tell you guys now. First part is I should have pieced it together. I mean, that is if I'm right. But all the signs are there. So I'm gonna feel really stupid if that's the case. So we are on page 319. And the chapter title that has me freaked out is Shizun is already married. And he's wearing a red outfit, which means that the freaking ghost king of hell might have wed him while he was unconscious against his consent. And if that's the case, I'm screaming. I won't actually, but just know in my mind I will be screaming. Okay, yep, let's go. Moran responded. A look of worry came over his face as something occurred to him. Shizun, I killed so many ghost soldiers just now. The underworld's probably not going to let us off easy. It's fine, Chuaning said. The technique doesn't scatter the opponent's soul irredeemably. Pronounce that word. It only shatters it. That sounds worse somehow, but okay. Those soldiers will piece themselves back together in a day or two. Moran peered down. Sure enough, specks of soul, like glowing fireflies, floated about the smouldering, charred remains. But before he could investigate further, he felt Chuaning tugging on his hand. Run! Another wave of furious soldiers rushed from behind the collapsed walls like a horde of rampaging beasts. Chuaning and Moran sped across the tiled roofs. As they ran, Moran asked, Shizun, if they don't really die, we won't offend the spiritual world that much. Why not let me use some spiritual energy and beat them back? Why did you try using it again? Chuaning asked sardonically. Moran was puzzled but tried nonetheless. To his surprise, all that issued from his whip this time was a tiny wisp of smoke. Jangye seemed terribly worn out. It displayed none of that impressive sun-swallowing, mountain-crashing might from a few minutes ago. Oh, great! Please tell me the spiritual energy isn't completely sapped. The more spiritual energy you use, the longer it takes to recover, Chuaning explained. So refrain from excess. Understood? Got it. Moran paused. Shizun, I just remembered something. Wanna guess what it is? What? I remember that time at the Peach Blossom Springs in the illusion, when you taught me how to use the willow vine just like this. You were really little back then. Moran grinned toothily and held up his hand, palm down. Didn't even reach my waist. Chuaning stumbled. I forgot he didn't know that Moran had found out. Oh no, Moran is never gonna let him live that down. Oh no. I feel so bad for Chuaning, but I'm also enjoying it. Careful, get lost. If Chuaning was still alive, his ears would have been red by now. Comparing heights with Shizun, he snapped in embarrassed anger. Why don't you pick on someone your own size like me? Moran grinned, refusing to take the bait. He was taller now, no longer visibly shorter than Chuaning as he had been back at Butterfly Town, but he was still only about even with him. He stole a sidelong glance at his Shizun and made a mental note to compare their heights in a few more years, once the young body of his was done growing. Oh my word, like, can you guys focus, please? While over here, Emperor Tashinjin was scheming away, over there, Yuhong of the night sky was contending with some rather complicated feelings. He'd been fairly sure Moran knew he was Shasini by now, but to actually hear him say it aloud was still a humiliating ordeal for Moran's thin face. After all, he had looked up at Moran and called him Sugar. Can we remember? The more he thought about it, the more mortified and incensed he felt. Chuaning ran faster and faster until Moran had to race to catch up. Oh my word, he's gonna get like a whipping when they're back in the mortal realm. I can just imagine. Moran had an inkling of what was going through his Shizun's head, so he let him run ahead and kept him half a pace behind. As they fled from their pursuers, with the wind blowing in their faces, Moran gazed at the man in front of him. He was just within reach, his red robes fluttering like drifting maple leaves, or ember clouds at dusk, scattered with gold-embroidered butterflies that glimmered, nearly alive. Moran was struck with a feeling of bittersweet contentment. In that moment he was grateful. Grateful that he could still see Chuaning. Grateful that he could receive his guidance as before. And in a few more years, if everything went smoothly, he could lower his head with a smile and tease. This disciple has come to compare heights with Shizun. This disciple will stand right here. Shizun can stand on tiptoes if he likes. What a place to be like thinking about those kinds of scenes while you're on the run. Volume 4 will be fun, hopefully. We shall have to wait and see. It's like it's waiting for me there on the shelf. Um Wait, hold on. I accidentally just skipped back a few pages. How did that happen? Hold on. Okay. His heart felt warm. The heavens were truly kind to him. Not everyone was afforded the chance to make amends after committing wrongs, and not everyone could forgive and let go after being hurt. Hishizun was so warm beneath that cold exterior, yet it had taken him so long to see it. They fended off two more waves of pursuers. The main gate of the palace was now within sight, which means canonically anything and everything that can go wrong will go wrong right now. Back, Moran saw that the soldiers chasing them had been left in the dust. They couldn't possibly catch up. Moran sighed in relief, but he hadn't even finished exhaling when a sudden clap of thunder boomed in front of them. A massive sedan chair materialized within a storm of fiery lightning, carried steadily upon the shoulders of eight brawny men who kneeled on the ground. A man reclined languidly on the sedan, his plump frame wrapped in snowy beast's fur, and his long hair draping loosely down. He had a beauty on each arm, one massaging his shoulders, while the other fed him cherries. I'm assuming this is the famed fourth Ghost King. He chewed and swallowed the fruit, consuming it rather than just letting it pass through for taste. This big-bellied man might be a soul, but he had cultivated a corporeal form. The man licked his lips and grabbed one of the beauties by the jaw. He planted a sloppy kiss on that lovely face before slowly glancing up at Chuaning and Moran with a sneer. Could it be that some hooligan is actually trying to steal this king's little darling? Well now, this simply won't do. He looked at Moran lazily. Quite the bold little cultivator, aren't you? Chuaning's face was so pale as to be nearly blue, and his expression was terribly sour. To have been called little darling by the greasy lecher of a ghost right in front of Moran. If he still had his powers, Tian Wen would have turned this bastard into paste by now. I wish we could have seen that. Moran's expression wasn't much better, but he was painfully aware that at his current level of cultivation, he couldn't protect Chuaning while also facing off against a ghost king. Thus, he could only try his hand at diplomacy. He stepped forward and cupped a hand over his fist respectfully. My lord, sincere apologies for the damage to your palace, but I will be taking this person. Oh, and that's up to you now, is it? The fourth ghost king smirked. What do you think he's wearing there? I'll tell you. It's a ghost marriage gown. In other words, the ceremonial robes of the underworld. Now that he's been clothed in my robes, he belongs to me. He won't be able to set so much as foot outside the gates of the palace. You don't have to take my word for it. Go on and give it a try. Great. That also implies that they're gonna have to get Chuaning naked to have him cross, which I don't think is gonna happen. But now I do have an interesting thought, because I'm wondering if the Shizun's already married thing wasn't in reference to the scumbag marrying Chuaning without his consent, but the fact that they technically had a ghost marriage way back in book 1, I believe. Would that count? Because it was a ghost marriage and this is the ghost realm, so I feel like if it should hold any weight anywhere, it should be in the ghost realm, right? I'm being too optimistic, aren't I? Take my word for it. Go on and give it a try. He paused and added, if you do bring him out by force, the spiritual energy within those robes will shatter your souls at the gate. Don't say I didn't warn you. Now Moran understood why Chuaning hadn't been restrained despite Rongjue's assertion that everyone in the main hall was tied up. So these red robes on him. Moran's hands clenched into fists. I'll make it up to you for taking him, of course, whatever my lord desires. I'll do my utmost to provide. This king wants only beauties, not the gentle, obedient kind. Those have become rather tedious of late. This king likes exactly the type standing there next to you, icy and standoffish. They've got more flavor that way. I hate the way he's talking. Moran and Chuaning both fell silent, both completely speechless. Intrigued by the look on their faces, the fourth king sat up unhurriedly and said, to be honest, this is the first time in all my years in the underworld that someone's busted into my palace to wreak havoc like this. I'm rather curious. Just who are you to him? He's my Shizun, Moran answered. Oh, is that all? The ghost king spread his hands and shrugged, grinning in amusement. And here I thought there was some kind of life or death bond. After a long moment, Moran tried again. What's the point in keeping him against his will if he doesn't like you? The ghost king gave a lazy wave of his hand. Foolish child, whether he likes me or not is irrelevant. It's his body the king desires, not his heart. Don't like this man at all. Ugh. Moran had no reply to that, And besides, the Ghost King continued with a sneer, so what if he doesn't like me? It's not like he likes you. Now, if you two were already wedded, that'd be a different story. This king fancies beauties, but I have no interest in second-hand goods. What a pity he's only your Shizun. That feels too good to be true. Moran was at first stunned, then he suddenly smiled. My lord means it? This king is the master of the 4th level of hell. Why should I waste my breath lying to a no-name little ghost like you? Then let me ask this. If my Shizun was indeed already married, then would the ceremonial robes have any effect? Of course not. This king has never cared to play with other people's husbands and wives. The 4th Ghost King furrowed his brow. Why do you ask? Is your Shizun already married? Chuaning cared about maintaining face. No, Moran did not. Yep. Guys, I'm living for this. I know it's already past the end of the 2 hours, but I need to see how this goes. The 4th Ghost King eyed them silently. Before Chuaning could say another word, Moran had already grabbed his hand and begun pulling him towards the gate. He looked over his shoulder at the 4th Ghost King as he walked. Don't mind him, my lord. Shizun's always had a terrible memory. Anyway, like you said, the ceremonial robes won't do anything if he's already married, so let's not waste time chatting. I'll just go ahead and take him outside. If we walk out without incident, then please let us go. If I lied, then I get what's coming to me. Moran, have you gone mad? Chuaning protested. That was just an act back at Butterfly Town. It doesn't count. Sure it counts, Moran said confidently, without the slightest hint of doubt. We drank the wine and did the vows with the ancestors above the earth below. Why wouldn't it count? Moran, after thousands of dull and monotonous years in the underworld, the Ghost King was tickled to witness such a quarrel. He settled into his chair and propped his cheek in one hand to watch with interest, then patted the thigh of the beauty beside him so she might feed him more candied fruit. Sure thing, go ahead, he said as he chewed. If you make it out in one piece, I won't keep you. If you die, that's on you. Many thanks, said Moran. Oh, yes, it's that one. That's the one I meant. Oh my goodness. The barrier over the main gate of the palace flickered with a faint purple light. It was clearly meant to keep the souls inside. The closer Chuaning got to that barrier, the more unwilling he grew. There was no way some slapdash ghost marriage like that would count. But just then, Moran leaned in closer and said in a quiet voice, Don't worry, Shizun. Our marriage is definitely valid. Valid how? Listen to me just this once. I know what I'm doing here. He laced their fingers together and squeezed, though his own palm was slick with sweat. And even if luck's not on our side, I'll be right here with Shizun. Chuaning flinched. He opened his phoenix eyes wide, staring at Moran in astonishment, as though seeing him for the first time. Moran beamed brightly at him, his dimples deep and warm. I owe Shizun so much already. This time around I won't abandon Shizun. Chuaning was silent for a long interval. He muttered softly, Why do all that? Then what about Shizun? Why did you do all that? Chuaning lowered his lashes. Then he let out a quiet sigh and stopped fighting. The two stood hand in hand before the crackling purple barrier as a mass of ghosts gathered behind them to watch the show. Ready? Ready. Neither could tell who tightened their grip first, squeezing so firmly, freezing cold over scalding warmth, clammy wrapped around dry, pale white against skin the color of wheat. The blazing inferno and roaring thunder of the barrier surged before them. It was like an enormous flood, a gigantic waterfall. They stepped in at practically the same time, and the tide of fiery lightning surged towards them. It crashed down with a might that could swallow mountains and rend rivers, threatening to tear apart this pair so bold as to step outside the gates of life and death. In the very next instant, it would rip them to shreds, burn them to ash. This tremendous current flared, with a light so blinding it was nearly white. It was a split second away from striking them. Moran had made up his mind to respect and love his Shizun, to never again disobey him, much less sully him with any untoward thoughts. But in that moment, in that uncertain breath between life and death, he whipped his head around, wanting to take one last look at Chuaning's face, only to see, amidst the deluge of sparks that rained down around them, Chuaning's gaze on him as well. So happy. Those phoenix eyes had at the time been fierce, resolute, pained, resentful, enduring, but in this instant they held a tranquillity before the end, and he wasn't sure if he was imagining it, a deep affection. Moran had never seen such a look in Chuaning's eyes before. There was a loud rumbling in his head like countless cities collapsing, and his chest was flooded with burning affection, bursting up from a thick layer of sooty black earth. He had no time to contemplate what kind of feeling this might be, overwhelmed as he was by the searing heat in his heart and the boiling of his blood. Between the flashes of lightning and crashing of thunder, he reached out without thinking and pulled Chuaning into a tight embrace. Frenzied heartbeats against quivering soul, chest to chest. Truth be told, before Moran had come down to the underworld, thought of dying together with Chuaning had never once crossed his mind. He had always thought the one he loved was Shimei, so if he were to die together with someone, it would be with Shimei. But when truly faced with the prospect of death, it would be with... He had instinctively pulled Chuaning into his arms, as if trying to merge Chuaning's flesh into his own, hide his soul within his own. Chuaning, I'm with you. Who would have thought? You two really are star-crossed lovers. An amused voice drifted indolently over. Can it be this king actually got the wrong ghost? This Shenzhen really is married? Moran's eyes snapped open. While he wasn't looking, the lightning and thunder that had been hell-bent on tearing them to pieces moments ago had transformed into countless dandelions, dancing lightly around them like a flurry of snowflakes. Why is that the cutest image ever? Like, the contrast. Um, mm, The fourth ghost king stood with a smile and clapped slow and leisurely from his sedan near the palace gate. It's been hundreds of humdrum years. That was a hell of a show. Moran was still in a stupor. He looked dazedly towards the fourth king, then turned to look at the person in his arms. He was hit with a sudden realization as to the impropriety of holding his Shizun like this, and hurriedly withdrew his hands. Chuaning also seemed to jolt back to reality and turned his face away, his expression unreadable as he straightened his robes in stiff silence. Moran lifted his head towards the fourth ghost king. See, my lord? He asked, attempting to ease the awkwardness. I didn't lie, did I? Kumo certainly did not. The fourth king shook his head, and the corners of his lips crooked up in an almost smile. It's nothing but monotony here day after day. It's been many years since I've been so entertained. Very well, I'll let you two go, if only as a thanks for the spectacle. This king has no shortage of beauties. I won't miss an already married soul. Moran was delighted. He thought to himself that this fourth ghost king was much more magnanimous than the ninth ghost king that Shishun had encountered. Sure, he was a perv, but at least he kept his word and had something of a lordly air about him. He turned to leave with Chuaning in tow. Just then, the clouds overhead scattered, and the light of the moon shone down on Moran, casting a dark and silent shadow at his feet. The fourth ghost. There was a moment where I didn't realize why that was important, but now I do. Meat Bun does not let us rest. She really just does not. Ghost King didn't react right away. He remained grinning, quite pleased with the rare diversion to which he'd been treated. He turned and gestured for the beauty at his side to feed him a grape. The beauty peeled the fruit of its dark purple skin and held the suckling, translucent flesh to the Ghost King's lips. He was about to open his mouth when he finally realized that something was off, and his head whipped around to say, "Hold it," he roared. He stared at the shadow. His gaze traveled up slowly, inch by inch, until it was fixed on Moran's face. After a long moment he said, "Why don't you take a look at what's on the ground?" Looking down, Moran discovered that, to his horror, that a blurry shadow clung to his feet. The fourth Ghost King's lax, whimsical expression evaporated at once, and his long and narrow eyes narrowed further, flickering with the avidity of a vulture ready to swoop on its prey. And how exactly did a living person like yourself manage to worm your way into hell? And that's where we're gonna end it, because apparently Meat Bun loves cliffhangers that just destroy us. So we managed to get up until page 329, which I'm very happy about. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I think we might, maybe, I'm not 100% sure, but we might be able to finish up this volume in Thursday's live stream. So that would be amazing, and ahead of schedule as well. But yeah, let me know what you thought. Again, hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm gonna go to bed now, and I will see you guys again in Thursday's live. Bye.